Good morning, and this is Steve, and once again I'm going to be reading from the book Attuned by Thomas Hubl, Practicing Interdependence to Heal Our Trauma and Our World. And I think it's interesting that we're practicing interdependence as we read and listen to this work and do some of the exercises. So the next part of the chapter is called Developing Relational Attunement. And I'm going to read the previous paragraph to this section because I think it's important to understand and hear it once again. The body-mind is the system with which I relate to others and to my world. It is my instrument. By developing the subtle capacities of my instrument, I learn to tune in, to hear, feel, sense, and see, to any unresolved energies in myself or others, such as the shock and fear felt by the child that he spoke about earlier. I could track the location of these energies in his body, that's the child's body, 1-year-old, by tuning into my own body and reading the information it conveys. This is all done gently, subtly, quietly. Yet for the other person, it creates a powerful feeling of being seen. Or what Dr. Dan Siegel, who's a clinical professor of psychiatry at UCLA School of Medicine and founder of the field of interpersonal neurobiology, describes as feeling felt. It is intrinsic to the nature of children and all people that feeling felt is experienced as positive feedback. Feeling felt is a function of relational safety and belonging, and it allows a growing child to open and express even more of who they are. Put simply, feeling seen encourages the human will or soul to continue to flower. Now the chapter, Developing Relational Attunement. We transmit our inner state directly into our environment. And that's just so true. This is something I'm very aware of. A person in a relaxed, grounded state transmits a relaxed, grounded energy into their environment. Possibly not so much today. This is something other people can feel. When we enter that space, our nervous system directly receives the transmission, and most of the time it has a relaxing, grounding effect on us, like a warm blanket of belonging. Of course, we can be so busy with ourselves that we are not aware of the transmission. But if we are present and attuned, the exchange is obvious. It is quite a beautiful feeling to meet and interact with people who are present. The more embodied and available you are, the more clearly you see the world. Heightened perception is a function of presence, and it has an innate developmental potential. Many successful business people are successful because they're highly attuned to the movement of their business. As a result, they are frequently able to sense what is coming, sometimes 3 steps ahead. Presence functions similarly in the relational space. When you're present, available, and attuned to others, your sense perception are heightened and clarified. You become more intuitive. When we practice transparent communication, we're listening deeply to the other with our whole bodies, allowing us to perceive even the subtlest cues, impulses, and threads that may appear. The word transparent refers to these subtle threads and layers of energy and information that are accessible through the intersubjective and transpersonal dimensions, the subtle space between us. Imagine two people. Let's call them Peter and Adele. Together they head to a cafe, order their coffees, and sit down across from one another to talk. Perhaps they spend an hour this way, sitting and chatting over steaming cups. Eventually, Adele begins sharing a difficult story about her past. If Peter is attuned and listens deeply, he will notice the slightest instances in which it feels as though Adele has disappeared from the space, even as she's talking. It is as if by mentioning some aspect of her past, she simply vanishes, just for a second, leaving her body and the present moment. Perhaps there is a second that her eyes appear to zoom very far out, as though she is no longer seeing Peter, but something in the distance, accompanied by a feeling of hollowness behind her voice. Peter can still hear Adele talking, but it's as if the line drops and she is no longer available. These sorts of disconnections happen all the time in the course of ordinary relating. One person's energy may suddenly contract, perhaps unconsciously as an avoidant or dissociative response. These instances are symptoms formed by an originating disconnection, an earlier place of injury, isolation, or trauma. A bit like encountering a small scratch on a record or a snag in the loop. If Peter is unaware of these subtle cues, he may be very surprised after 6 months or a year of dating to learn that Adele experienced a past trauma, or that is still occupying a significant portion of the energy she might otherwise have available for their relationship. Very often, it is the unconscious recognition of one another's wounds that brings two people together in a romantic relationship. The unresolved pain belonging to one partner is like a key that perfectly fits the lock made by the unresolved pain in the other. Often a pair like this feel an intense, even overwhelming connection and quickly become romantically involved without recognizing their traumatic bond. After 6 months or a year, when the relationship becomes problematic and painful, both parties are often taken totally by surprise. How was it that they could fall so madly in love only to have it sour so quickly? We could think of marriage as a process of learning and becoming aware of everything we missed about our spouse when we first fell in love. Many times the client will sit down and immediately begin sharing an emotionally charged story about his or her relationship dynamic. "Listen, Thomas, I had an argument with my wife," a man might say, "and this is what happened." He then launches into the dramatic details as he sees them, usually a recapitulation of who was right and who was wrong. If I'm not fully present and attuned, I could be hypnotized by his story, finding that I agree or disagree with the reported behaviors of his wife. But if I listen from a deeper place, with my whole body, I may notice that as my client is describing the details of his relationship crisis, his energy is no longer present in his legs and feet, as if he no longer standing on the ground. There is an energetic absence in his lower body, and he has lost touch with physical sensation there. Tuning in more, I sense that he is contracted in his upper torso or head, or that he is absorbed by and responding from fear, as if in a survival, defensive posture. It is the energy of fear, then, that the man is avoiding or absencing, perhaps so that he can feel strong rather than vulnerable. And if he has less life force anywhere in his body, his awareness is diminished there. That part of him will be invisible to him. Simply put, the man has interpreted his relationship saga as so threatening that he can no longer stay grounded enough to process it. When the energy center at the base of your spinal column is weak, you are ungrounded. There is no connection to the earth beneath your feet, and you might come across to others as restless, detached, adrift, or disconnected. Falling is the most primal biological fear instinct. All infants experience it. We contract our energy and remove it from the base in reaction to a fear, often unacknowledged and unprocessed, about a threat to our survival. It is vital that we become aware of when we leave the ground, as this is a signal from the body that there is something that needs our attention. To continue forward as mature, healthy adults, we need to explore this fear. Whether it appears in ourselves or in others, simply staying present and attuned to it, rather than making it wrong, is a compassionate act, one that allows us to gently restore embodied relation. And I appreciated reading those words out loud today and really embodying those words as I read them. And may you find them useful and helpful in understanding some of the things that may go on in your interpersonal relationships. And now let's go.